Okay. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. We would wish to get started, so I'd wish to draw your attention towards the program for the day. First, I hope you had a good night's rest for those who were here yesterday. For those who have joined us this morning, we wish you well so that you can join into the mainstream. We covered quite a lot of ground yesterday, so for those who are joining us this morning, it would be well to find somebody who was here yesterday. They can probably give you a brief. But to make it formal, we would want to have the summary of the deliberations of yesterday. So the rapporteur for yesterday. Okay, I'm informed by the director that he's the one who is actually going to present it. So welcome, Professor Bare, to take us through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Just to also reinforce the point that Paul has said, I hope you had a good evening, a good rest, and that we are ready for this session. Before I start with the wrap-up, taking up the responsibility of being a rapporteur, let me take this opportunity to introduce an important guest who has joined us this morning and is going to be our guest for today, Professor Bernard Aduda. Now, yeah, Professor Bernard Aduda is the DVC, Academics, Research and Extension at Egerton University. So, Prof, welcome and feel comfortable. All right, now, let me just take, I think I've been given about 10 minutes to summarize what happened yesterday. It was quite an exciting session filled with presentation, storytelling from the farmers, panel discussion. And so in broad, we started with providing a context upon which the proceedings were going to be based, and we talked about the agricultural growth and development in Kenya in the past decade, and what the participants got to hear was about the trends in Kenya's agricultural sector in the last decade, and the lessons from the results or analysis that went into exploring the development patterns and growth over the decade, and the building blocks that upon which this development took place. What we had was that agricultural production is vulnerable to shocks, including weather, pests and disease outbreaks, and as well as markets. We also had that growth in the past decade had contracted from the previous decade, which was as a result of input intensification and area expansion. So growth was driven by input intensification and area expansion, and that the government contributed to growth through public sector programs and input subsidies the public investments remained low though, and that they were not efficient, and that these public investments kind of like crowded out the private sector investment, and that the country has opportunity to sustainably grow, but that would depend on whether the country then adopts a productivity-led growth path. And this will require pursuing, again, productivity growth and competitiveness, including women and youth, providing incentives for attracting public and private sector investment, and also leveraging on modern technologies, which will then include digital technology. And then from there now we went to discuss about focused areas, and the first area that we focused on was fertilizer and soil health. Within that space, the discussion centered on the approaches for managing soil health, which included the farmers' readiness to participate in soil testing programs, and also the willingness to pay for the soil testing exercise. And what came out is that the fertilizer prices kind of started coming down in last year, but although the global fertilizer prices were low at the global market, the local prices were high or remained high. The fertilizer subsidy led to crowding out of the private sector fertilizer participants, and then the recommendation was that the subsidy be implemented by considering the private sector, and that the subsidy itself need to be targeted and limited in terms of quantity, and also the risks need to have a clear exit strategy. The agro-dealer business remained highly competitive, in that the farmers were not able to tell whether the fertilizer that they procured or they got was of high or low quality, so information asymmetry. There existed bad quantity fertilizer in the market, and there was need to investigate further what the drivers for this type of various quality fertilizers are. And then we went further and tried to delve into the willingness to pay for soil testing. I think I mentioned that a little bit. We then went further to talk about the agricultural value chain development, and after that we also looked at the political economy of the factors influencing agricultural value chains. And this was one area that I think was highlighted, that we need essentially to relatively inquire a little bit more into. And so the issue was there is need to give attention to the role of political economy, with particular attention to commercialization patterns and the role of this political economy in rural transformation. The reason being that the many value chain studies seem to be silent on the role of the political economy on either their development, the development of the value chains themselves. Then we also talked about whether commercialized farmers drive agricultural transformation in rural Kenya. I think one of the key keyword that came out of that presentation is the stepping in and I guess maybe stepping out, and that those farmers who are stepping in tend to have an influence on the development of the extant farmers in terms of even influencing the level of be it the level of I guess income, the level of income to those farmers who are let's say extant to the stepping in farmers. So land markets for both for rent and purchases constitute a major pathway for extension of the medium scale farms, and that medium scale farms are more productive than the small scale farms. Then we were presented with the case studies on aquaculture and beef value chains to provide insights into policy prioritization in the aquaculture value chain. What we are told is that there's a challenge with regard to feed, and that reforms are necessary to unlock the full potential of the aquaculture value chain. And then there is need to strengthen the regulatory environment to improve the feed quality. Then we had something about zoning of Lake Victoria in order to prioritize and finalize the implementation of a special plan. With regard to the beef value chain, we were informed that Kenya beef prices are lower compared to the world market prices, but that these prices are consistently rising, and that the key intervention areas that are required is just like include the expansion of feedlots, that productivity gains can be achieved through improving the genetics within the agripastoral production systems, and that there is need to change the grading system so that the beef products can be accessed from the international market. And then we looked at the lessons and perspective from the agricultural value chain development project, which I think we got some idea from the representative of the ministry. What we were told was that there are some of the projects that have been implemented, including the Kenya Climate Smart Agricultural Project, and then the NARIG, and then the new one, the National Value Chain Development Project. What we were told is that there are about 16 value chains that were considered in that 4 rural and rural counties, and then 2 urban counties as well. And certain key messages that we got is, first of all, the question that was posed was, what influences participation of women and youth in agriculture? And we are told that time to participate, particularly for women, or the women workload does have an influence. And then that resource constraint also contributes to the participation. That the question that was not answered sufficiently was whether youth and women have access to requisite information, and then the kind of interventions that are required to motivate participation of women and youth include the promotion of technologies and innovations that are attractive to both groups. There is need to bridge the aggregation centers, to bring the aggregation centers close to the producers, and that will then address the time constraint that might be facing these two groups. Then we are also told that there is need to form associations, or from this project, I think the information was a need to form associations and groups that are women and youth friendly and oriented. Then we were told that GIZ is implementing projects that are more geared to food production, food systems, rather than value chain approach, because I think the focus here, we had focused on value chains, but I think the information that we are given is, instead of possibly looking at the value chains, we better look at the food systems in a broader sense. And then we also had information with regard to market access, actually. So these projects that have been implemented from the government perspective, also looking at market access in order to ensure sustainability. There was the issue of land use policy development in order to support the counties to ensure that the land leasing agreement support the value chains over time. I think that is what I've been able to capture. I hope I've been able to capture what transpired yesterday sufficiently enough in order to enable you to possibly have this transition to today's session. Thank you, Facilitator Paul.
Thank you for that refreshing of our minds in terms of what transpired yesterday. There are a number of things that one could have picked up, and it depended on your perspective. But there was one key one that stands out, that, and it came almost towards the end in terms of the presentations and the discussions. Basically, the fact that the agriculture sector now is taking the food systems approach. I think the agri-food systems approach is much more in the game now. Yeah, thank you. So that shift needs to be there, and with the agri-food systems approach, it means looking at agriculture as a system and looking at the components as interrelated. I think that is the key thing that is emerging from here, as opposed to the time that we have been looking at value chains, which is also very critical, as we have been doing in the past. But the approach now is towards, I think the whole thing, when the Food Systems Summit took place, I think that is when the concept really gained currency. And so now there's a lot more focus towards looking at the agriculture sector as a system and looking at the different entities as components which need one another to move on. So There are a number of things, like we have said, emanating from those presentations. We cannot list them all, but we need to be cognizant of the specific areas that we are working in and really take into account the issues and the developments that are taking place in those areas. Now, just like we did yesterday, we want, before we get into the program for the day, we want to hear a little bit from the practitioners. A little bit from the practitioners. As we said yesterday, this sets the pace for us. And so in order to do that, I will want to invite, yesterday we agreed that we are no longer talking about farmers per se, we are talking about agripreneurs. So I would want to invite agripreneurs in different enterprises. The first agripreneur is Fred Chitechi, and Fred Chitechi is a dairy agripreneur. And listen to this. If you are hearing dairy, you are more inclined to think about Kiambu or Uasin Gishu and so on. Fred is not from any of those places. Fred is from Kakamega. So let me invite Fred to share with us his experiences, and especially in terms of the challenges and opportunities that he has gone through. So welcome, Fred. Please let's put our hands together for Fred.
Thank you, Bwana MC. My name is Chitechi Fred. I'm a nurse by profession. I'm equally a contractor. But today I'm here to speak specifically about dairy farming. Currently, I specialize in dairy farming within Kakamega County, Lurambi constituency to be precise. That's mostly where I do my operations. Today I've been tasked with the responsibility to give a story about a journey of a dairy farmer within the market space. Like many of you, I was an old school farmer who believed in producing high quality milk was the way to go. I was shocked to find out that it wasn't about quality alone. But also about it wasn't about quality alone, but also to serve my customers or clients' needs. First of all, I had to understand the market that I'm serving. Those are my consumers. I noticed most of them were most of them were changing their mode of milk consumption. They were not going to the shelves to buy the ordinary processed milk. They would they would look for farmers directly, like me. Most of the time I'd see farmers come to my place requesting for organic milk most of the time. I wanted to know why most of my neighbors were not going to the supermarkets to get the processed milk. Most of them were Most of them really wanted the organic milk, fresh from the cow. So I was intrigued. I wanted to find out why. At that time, I only had 2 cows. That was 3 or 4 years back. So most clients would come, they'd request for raw milk. I'd give them. The numbers continued because I think where I was located as one of the pioneer dairy farmers around the area. So this, I saw a market gap, and it gave me strength to look for more cows to meet my neighbors' needs. I remember there's a time I started attending local farmers meetings within my area. At this point, discussing with them the benefits they would prefer. And I noticed most of them wanted to know the type of feeds I'm giving my cattle, the type of treatment I undertake. Most of them would also want to visit my farm to see the type of feeds I'm giving the cows, the level of hygiene, standard handling of milk after it's been, the milk has been collected from the cows. Yeah. In fact, while talking to them, I realized that there was also a way that I could increase on value addition to my cows. I do some value addition like yogurt, cheese, though most of them are not used to cheese within Kakamega. But over time, I think with the proper proper teaching and educating my neighbors, I think they'll all embrace cheese farming. Yeah, so there's also a broader way to help our local farmers within the area to join the venture. Dairy farming is not that bad. I think I visited Githunguri once. I was motivated by what the young boys they were doing. I'm also trying to educate some of the young people within Kakamega to join the venture. Hence, collaborating and networking. And I think through this networking is where I ended up joining a cooperative society within Kakamega. That's the Kakamega Dairy. While at it, I ended up, it opened ways for me in ways I could not imagine. I ended up meeting Tegemeo Institute. They were in Kakamega. They visited my farm, I think a month or 2 ago. They were impressed with whatever venture I was taking. They encouraged me. They told me I I'm on the right path. And hence today I'm here, courtesy of Tegemeo. I'm very grateful for this invitation. So there's another way of thinking within Kakamega. We do not have there's a big market for milk and potential. We're even putting up a processing plant through the county government. We're hoping that we'll be able to sell our milk to areas like Githunguri or areas within Kakamega. I mean, our neighbors within Kakamega. Mostly we don't have Kakamega own produced milk. We mostly rely for milk. You'll find milk on our shelves from Githunguri, but it's very saddening that you might not find milk within Kakamega produced from Kakamega onto our shelves. So we're hoping as a new crop of farmers will be able to do something and change that within the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I think the key thing there is getting into the higher stages of value chain development. I think that's a major one, not just producing the raw milk, and having the dream of also developing a processing plant. So thank you for those remarks. I would want now to call Felix Mwai, who deals with coffee and operates at higher stages of the coffee value chain. Welcome, Felix.
Yes, thank you very much, Bwana Paul. My name is Felix Moridi Mwai, a beneficiary of Egerton University, and also a beneficiary of Professor here. He taught me micro, macro, and production economics. Yes, I'm a businessman. I ventured in coffee production chain as a passion. So I'm here to give a story. I'm not a researcher. To give a story at my journey in coffee. I'm a businessman with interest in tourism and real estate based in Nairobi. But in my village, rural area where I come from, Kirinyaga County, I had my dad's farm. And I was privileged to have 2 or 3 acres of land, which was mainly tea growing. And I realized with my lifestyle of wanting to be in Nairobi, a businessman, I was not able to cope up to that with that crop. Because tea to me needed attention after every 12 days. You have to pick. So I needed a posh crop where I can be able to do my errands and comfortably be able to run that. I tried to think about, I said it's a storytelling, so I'll not be referring to any computer materials. So I tried to think about horticulture. I realized it's even more tasking. Daily farming was also too tasking. And at that point, I got getting myself to CRI, taking advantage of my AJEC. You know, I used to call it AJEC, Prof. Agriculture Economics. So I went there, and by the time I was getting out of CRI, I knew I needed to plant coffee. When I got out of CRI, I was told you only need 50 shillings per kilo for it to be a good venture to you. And because my rural coffee factory or pumping station had been 56. So I went home with the madness of uprooting my tea leaves 100%. Everybody said, that boy, you remember him? In the high school, he was not of good studying around. But I was determined to do that because I was acting out of information. So that was back 2012. In year 2016, my coffee bushes were of age, and I realized at one point I poured fertilizer worth 50,000. Those were 15 bags, which I was buying at 34.50 from Tropical Farm Management, because I was told that is the best fertilizer. After pouring that 50,000 on the ground, I asked myself, not unless I'm stupid, how am I going to not to follow this? So I asked guys around and they told me, there is a meeting for the coffee on this Thursday. Can you come? So I went in a meeting and I got guys a pricing of body policies. So I would follow the multitude to the county authorities, and by accident I was asked, come this site, you air your grievances. I was very new, greenhorn, not knowing anything. But my stupid question, which I asked on that forum, is what I'll pose to the academicians, these professors in this room, because I think we are the people who are letting this country down. At that point, we are tasking the management which was there, which I found nobody was educated. And I asked a stupid question. What happens? Everybody here, some of them, they cannot even be able to write their names. How comes these are the people who run the coffee, which is traded at international level? A cooperative official told me, young man, because that time they could have called me young man, do you know you get educated and you go to Nairobi? These men you are seeing around, they meet with others who are not educated like them, and they choose one of them. So where are you? Not unless you come back in these villages, you give back, nothing will ever change. Professors, academicians, that is the task we have. If we are researching and you are getting answers of your research, please practice in that local area. From that question, I have never missed a single coffee meeting. And in year 2017, I got a lot of resistance. This guy is coming from Nairobi. It is a mad business, but it is what this country needs. In year 2017, I remember coming up with the papers from Nairobi Coffee Exchange, trying to show guys, and I was branded all names. I was even told I'm Makateri from Nairobi, but I didn't tire. So when we engage in it, it will be tiresome, it will be murky, but that is what this country needs. Imagine when you are getting educated, that neighbor shaped you. That teacher in the neighborhood shaped you. But where we are we becoming good to those communities? Are we giving back to those communities? In year 2021, I was told your stories are becoming too much. Not unless you come and sit on that seat, you'll be doing what you've been telling us. So I was lucky. I was given a post of committee member of my local coffee factory. But when we congregated at the center of the society, I was given the chairmanship, and I'm the chairman in Noe Farmers Cooperative Society Limited. An entity which I got with 600,000 kilos when everybody was doing well in Kirinyaga. Today I'm priding myself moving to 2 million because of change of the leadership. That is the entity which is affiliated with Kirinyaga County Union, which is the #1 mover of coffee in this country through cooperatives. I know that's news to you. In this country, Kiambu is the biggest producer of coffee, but largely plantations. Cooperatives are led by Kirinyaga County, and the small it is, this year was able to share about 5 billion. Unfortunately, the filing standing in front of you comes from the most failed society. If you go to Varagwe farmers, those guys were sharing 1.5 billion, if you go to Rongeto, FCS, Farmers Cooperative Society Limited, a society of three factories, each and every village or each and every factory is sharing more than 80 million per year. So money which I'm certainly sure there's no other crop with such kind of comparative advantage. In this room, I'll try to answer why coffee. Coffee today is the most political crop. I don't think we can ever meet in a week without mentioning coffee. Yet we are not consumers of coffee. Yes, I wish to pose to professors around and say this. If we want to change this country, if we have space for coffee, if the environment allows us to be able to do that, coffee is the best crop to turn around this country. For what reason? Let us look at production per area, which I was taught by Professor Ombare here. If you go to CRI, planting radio 11, you need 6.6 feet or 2 meters by 2 meters. In an acre, we are talking about 900 stems of coffee. In a quarter, we'll be talking about 230 stems of coffee. Try to get a quarter, because our family, our population is not endowed with the land. You imagine a quarter of land with the 230. If you get 10 kilos per tree, we are talking about 2,300 kilograms of coffee. So if you pay like the much we pay in Kirinyaga, we are talking about 230,000 kilos from a quarter of acre land. I pause here. Which is that crop can give us 230,000 from a quarter acre? So because our people don't have those so large lands, I think it's incumbent on ourselves to ensure that we invest in this. Coffee has large market. It is only that we don't consume coffee, but in the world, coffee we are producing even less than what the world is demanding. Because Bwana Paul here is showing me my time is almost up. I would say this: when coffee regulations, Coffee Act came, Coffee Crop General Regulation 2019 changed a lot of things. And one of the things which changed is the way the coffee was being marketed in this country. This coffee was being marketed by people which we used to call marketing agents, who are largely multinationals. These multinationals would mill the coffee, they would market the coffee, and they would buy the coffee themselves. Today, we are priding ourselves that we are well involved. What has been lacking in agriculture is the fact that farmers are never involved. Yesterday, I was telling somebody, a colleague here, that you remember the times the government would come and have projects, and the projects, because they are not owned by the locals, they become white elephants. We've been making policies from up there, but they are not trickling down. I thank the facilitators of this congregation that you are now ensuring the farmers are coming here to give their views. What the change of the Crop Act 2019 of coffee has done to us, it is involving me directly. When I was there yesterday, I would be able to follow my coffee being sold at Nairobi Coffee Exchange. Actually, I was supposed to be there. Initially, it never used to happen. So because of that involvement, initially, farmer would take the coffee to the factory, you would prepare the coffee. When you give to the multinationals, you wait for the papers, milling statements, and the money. Today, we are doing it ourselves. Other counties could be having issues, but if we would wish to have the best researches about coffee and coffee prospects, it is in Kirinyaga County. Kirinyaga County, last year we were able to mill our coffee, and we were able to sell our coffee through Kirinyaga Slopes Brokerage Company, which is still owned by the farmers through Kirinyaga Union. So I know there have been issues. Government has been changing that. People are saying there are hiccups, but as any new thing happening, or when you're trying to implement anything new, there shall be teething problems. but I can tell the researchers in this room that the coffee is the crop which will change this country, which is good for us, and which can change us because it once was the best forex exchange earner, and it can still be able to beat tea and any other thing. So, but even yesterday, to get back after giving my story, from yesterday, maybe I had one of two issues I wanted clarification, maybe from the fertilizer, people who are researching on fertilizer, and even soil testing. I asked one of us, we are saying soil testing is 1,300. Why are our farmers not uptaking it? But they are comfortable buying fertilizer at 4,500. Is it that really expensive? To me, it is not. It is only that people don't know the importance of it. We are researching up here, but you are not giving the information down there. We know the problems up there, but our peasant farmers don't understand it. Yet that peasant farmer is able to buy fertilizer at 4,500 shillings. So I think there's a disconnect there. And maybe to iron on that is to ensure that maybe it's to advise the government of the day that we have to get back where we need to have more agronomists teaching our farmers. So the other point was about I was baffled that the world fertilizers are getting down. And maybe it is for us to get the information, what are the expected prices so that we can be able to make noise where it is necessary, so that we can be able to have it. As I get away, I would say that to me, after getting to the agriculture as a way of giving back to the community, it is the best thing to me. And the researchers here, I would pose a question to you. How many of our children think agriculture is important? Yesterday we talked about agriculture being backbone of this economy, but I don't know whether we are walking that talk. If you go to a university near me, which is Kirinyaga University, where I ran through, I only see a very bad picture of a coffee farm being run by university, which is so bad, in a county which is becoming number one, no? I don't know whether our priorities are up and down. And I was telling my friend who are taking breakfast with here, in this morning, what we are taking is agriculture. The tea we are taking is agriculture. The cassava we are taking is agriculture. And at one point, Museveni asked people, how many people ate computers today in the morning? How many will also eat computers in the evening? How many will eat BCom in the evening? I'm hoping that Egerton University can walk its purpose of saying agriculture is the best thing for this country. Until we're able to get there, we shall never see economic freedom in this country. We've scandalized agriculture like a dirty profession. When we are going to university, we are being told, ameenda kufanya agriculture. Yet, the person who is saying that, the something which is giving him that voice is agriculture. I think we need to package information about agriculture. Knowing very well, in this country, there's no section of this country which is not important, which cannot be productive. I come from Mount Kenya, but remember, in Makueni, there's something which has happened through the governor Kibudha. In early 2000, we entertained with oranges from South Africa. Today we are having pizzas from Makueni, which are beating those Makueni. If you eat, you today take an orange from Makueni, from Kimbwezi, it is better than oranges from South Africa. We have very arable land. We are endowed with good resources. I liked the issues about the beef farming. You know, to us who are in crop, we don't imagine beef farming as a business, yeah? So I think it is important. We appreciate ourselves as a country. And we campaign for agriculture because agriculture is our livelihood. Thank you very much.
Challenges. Yeah. For those from universities you have heard, I don't need to repeat it. If you need to visit your farms, please do. We will not overemphasize that point. But I think the more critical thing is, you know, the fact that Felix can paint a rosy picture of coffee. I think in our minds we had written off this crop. And the fact that he can see opportunity there is really an issue for us to address. And lastly, for those of us in town, remember you have a small piece somewhere. Do something about it. Yeah, I think that those are the key lessons that we have to take home. Now that Felix has given us quite a lesson, and it has also taken a bit of our time, I'm beginning to think, before I invite the next chair, that actually I've gotten representations here. People are already thinking about lunch and how quickly we can finish this one so that we can move on for the day. So what I'm going to propose is that for those who are coming, please bear with us. We are requesting you, and we'll ask the chairs to be particular about this one. We are requesting you to shave off 5 minutes of your presentations. So if you had 15 minutes, please don't think about going to 20 minutes, think about going to 10 minutes. All right? So that we can be within the time that we have envisaged. With that in mind, I will want now to request Wilfred Olwach from FAO, who is standing in for Anchele, to chair this particular session that we want to get started on, so that he can come over here and invite his speaker and operate within the time limits that we have defined. So, Wilfred, welcome.
So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, again, a very good morning. As has been indicated, my name is Wilfred Olwach from the FAO Kenya office. I'm standing in for Ann Chele, who is the head of our policy and investment team that is very much invested or involved in these activities we're talking about here. First of all, I want to be sure that we keep time because we are already behind. But I couldn't help but just comment a little bit about what Felix has said. Felix, I remember we were with you at the ministry when this issue of EUDR came up, and I can confirm you were just as passionate there. So maybe you have another job at hand of being an agriculture spokesperson for the government, and it's something maybe you should consider. And I'll also probably look you up so that I can also invest in that posh crop you've talked about. I like that idea because my home is very far away in Sia, and going there once a month is ideal, so we'll be talking. That having been said, let me just mention one very quick thing. As FAO, we've also been involved recently in a national registration of farmers in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture. So there is a national registry of 6.5 million plus farmers, which includes important information that could inform some of the things that I had Prof talking about as you were recapping. For example, one of the questions in the questionnaire was, do you do soil testing? And which kinds of fertilizer do you use? So there's a lot of scope if that data was democratized for people to be able to do those analytics and actually answer those questions that have been posed here. But in the interest of time, we have a session right now that will take approximately 25 minutes. When our presenter comes up, I will ask him to keep it very short. So Kelvin, we'd like you to keep it to 10 to 15 minutes, and then you're saying even less?
No, I'll try my best.
And then we will have a session of about 10 minutes of Q&A, and we'll try and wrap up the Q&As into a definitive way forward. So without much ado, Kelvin, over to you.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kelvin Shikuku. I work with the International Livestock Research Institute. ILRI is a member of the CJR, which is a consultative group on international agricultural research. And I have, I'm happy to have this opportunity of resilience in food systems. And so I thank Tegemeo and also the project about this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we heard already yesterday that food systems are increasingly facing, different types of shocks. There was a mention of pests and diseases. We know that not only the frequency, but also intensity and duration of climatic or extreme weather events have increased. We heard about, fertilizer, but also fuel price shocks being problematic. And I hope you remember also about pests and diseases, fall armyworm, and the locusts, for example. So all these shocks affect food systems, but there's still the expectation that food systems will deliver certain outcomes that we care about. And it's not just food and nutrition security, but also employment, income generation, and even environment-related outcomes. So therefore, that makes this topic extremely important. How, within this kind of rapidly changing contexts, how can food system deliver on this mandate? And so, let me skip and come here directly. I wanted to start by maybe, I know there are many definitions of what resilience in food system might mean, but here I look at it at the capacity of food systems to deliver desired outcomes in the face of shocks and stresses. And the delivery of those outcomes depend on several important things. First of all, the food system must be able to anticipate these shocks. They must be able to prevent them. They must be able to absorb them. And they must be able to adapt. Now, recent evidence seems to suggest that food systems are struggling to actually do what I just mentioned, right? So there's insufficient capacity of food systems to do this, which kind of then, places a huge responsibility on us to see how we can enhance that capacity. Now, again, very quickly, you have heard, or I've seen more complex diagrams than this. My intention is not to make it even more complex. But here what you see is that building resilience in food systems is necessary, right, to make sure that such system can withstand shocks and stresses, but more importantly that they can maintain progress towards desired outcomes, such as what you see on the right-hand side, food and nutrition security, economic and social well-being, including employment and poverty reduction, but also environment sustainability. But then you see that in the middle, you have several actors, and you also have kind of a supporting environment, but there are also several drivers that kind of, shape how the food system performs. Well, if these pieces kind of come together nicely, we can expect that the food systems will deliver the outcomes. The problem is that when shock happens and the system is kind of disrupted, then it's difficult to imagine how those outcomes could be achieved. What it takes, though, to deliver these food system outcomes, at least the way I see it, is that the food systems should or must be resilient to shocks and stresses. But more important, it's not just about thinking about outcomes today, but thinking about what will happen in the future. Right? We shouldn't compromise. We shouldn't be intervening today in ways that compromise our ability to do things in the future. But also, as I said, as you saw in the graph, there are different actors here, and we have to think about how equitable, in terms of cost and benefits, the outcomes that the food system generates are, right, to different social groups. And I know that economists kind of have approaches that can help us to understand the extent to which that is happening. Now, but very briefly, because we are talking about the Kenya food system, let's look at a few kind of outcomes within this food system. It has already been mentioned, the importance that the important role that agriculture plays, accounting for a huge share in the GDP, but also contributing significantly to employment. What we see, if we look at between 2010 and 2022, is that actually employment in agriculture has, declined slightly. Of course, this is a trend that we would want to reverse. The question is how, but we have the brains in the room, and I think we have the means as well. But also there's this issue that we talked about yesterday, that about 75 to 80% of the population is below 35 years old. And within that segment of the population, unemployment is problematic. So how, again, can food system contribute to addressing that issue? The population or the proportion living below poverty lines declined, or statistics show that declines, if we look at 2005 to 2006, until 2019, there's considerable decline there. This kind of was reversed during the pandemic period, increasing again to about 40% in 2020, but again painting the picture that these pandemics, when they happen, they can have serious impacts. But the other dimension that is important when we think about food systems is this aspect of food and nutrition security. Here again, there are many things you can think about, but I show these two graphs, one showing a trend in the proportion of the population that is severely or moderately food insecure. Many may want to wish that that we are observing kind of declining trends or improvements, but the picture seems different from this particular source that I quote here. And in fact, more than 70% of the population was severely or moderately food insecure in 2023. Now, on the right-hand side, you see that when you think about consumption of the different food groups, there are some food groups that we are actually over-consuming, or we are kind of consuming above what the world reference is. Starchy staples was mentioned yesterday, but when you think about some healthier diets, vegetables, for example, the reference, we are nowhere close to reaching what the reference is. And so there's kind of opportunities for us to move towards improving these outcomes. And then, as I mentioned, the other dimension is around environment sustainability. Often, and I'll show people, it's easy to blame food systems, for example, as a leading, or agri-food system as a leading emitter. But the truth is that they also contribute significantly to environmental outcomes. But here I show you maybe opportunities where food systems can contribute. 11% of tree cover was lost between 2001 and 2022. Yesterday we heard about issues around soil health, land degradation, and declining soil fertility, but also freshwater use by Kenya's agriculture sector is responsible for roughly 80% of kind of freshwater withdrawals. Okay, I talked about the last one, the emissions within food systems, but I think the promise is that there are already innovations and interventions that are being implemented to, speak to these issues within food systems. Very briefly here, in terms of the drivers, there are many drivers you can imagine within these categories. Demographics, population has grown significantly, from 7.8 million in 1960 to about 54 million in 2022. Consumption patterns are also changing now with increase in income, with urbanization, kind of increasing. We see shifts in consumption patterns. Technology, there has been a lot of advancement, both driven by the CGR, but also national research organizations. We saw, for example, yesterday, genetic improvement, etc. But also even in terms of digital financial innovations that have made it easier or have unlocked financing for farmers and pastoralists. Markets, there's also connections, not just domestically, but also internationally, as we heard from the farmer. And so, these are kind of opportunities to tap into. And climate change and environment is a big one, because of all these changes in trends. I mean, as you can see in this graph, we faced already several episodes of drought, but also there's a lot of variability. And then lastly, there's also the politics and the geopolitics dimension. The way I see it is that if we wanted to achieve food system resilience in Kenya, we need to think about 4 important capacities or capabilities. And these are kind of what any kind of strong or resilient food system, correlate strongly with these capacities. The first one is agency capacity. And what do we mean by that? Right? So these are the means and the capacities of people, to be able to mitigate risks, but also to be able to respond to shocks, when they happen. And the second one is about really buffering or creating buffers. So what are those resources? Can we ensure that there are resources to back on, in the face of shocks and stresses? It's difficult to think about a resilient system if there are not kind of connectivity among actors and communication among actors in the system. And so really, if we are aiming at enhancing capacity, we should be thinking about how we can strengthen interconnection and communication between and among actors in the system. And lastly, is also about diversity in the system, again, at different scales, but also different place. And thinking about right from production to consumption and farm level, right? And even at regional level. So, we again cannot forget about this capacity. So if we were intervening, it's easier for us to think about how our intervention contributes to these capacities, and then ultimately see how that contributes to the outcomes that I mentioned earlier. And this again kind of came to my mind. Conflict is something that now we cannot ignore. We increasingly see incidences of conflict. They're becoming not only more frequent but also severe. And so there's this kind of an opportunity for us to think about how how we can kind of tap into this humanitarian development and peace nexus. When a crisis happens, we have to save lives. We have to act now, but we have to do that in ways that kind of still create sustainability, in the future, create long-term from a long-term development perspective. And without peace, as we heard yesterday from the Vice Chancellor, a hungry man is an angry man. So insecurity begets a humanitarian crisis, and that begets a development crisis. So how do we, within a food system, ensure that these 3 interactions happen, or at least we recognize them, interactions or overlap among these 3 dimensions? I was going to give a very brief example, because now in Kenya there's this Kenya Food System Resilience program that some of you may already have heard about. It aims to tackle the underlying structural challenges of food insecurity and also reduce beneficiary sensitivity to unpredictable climate crisis and conflict events. But I think what was interesting for me was some of the components that they have, which also speak to the different capacities that I mentioned. So for example, it aims to build resilient agricultural production capacity, and then look at the things mentioned there, recognizes the importance of digital, data and digital agricultural systems, climate smart agriculture, building on the work that, for example, was already done under the Climate Smart Agriculture program, but also thinking about what the farmer said, how do we really get these technologies into the farmer's field, so community engagement and technology transfer. But the other component speaks about supporting sustainable development of natural resources. And this is particularly important because most of the vulnerable places are also places that are struggling with natural resource management, rangeland management, water management. And so there's importance here to make sure that water availability for crops and animals is maintained, as well as using approaches such as participatory rangeland management that can kind of ensure the sustainable utilization of resources. Access to markets, as I already mentioned, is important, but then, and again, the farmer talked about cooperatives or farmers association, and I think even yesterday Dr. Kahariri was also mentioning this. How can we strengthen those associations? This particular program recognizes that important role and kind of has resources allocated towards that direction and is thinking also about market infrastructure and enterprise development. So for example, again, going back to yesterday, issues around cold storage and other market infrastructure is what this program wants to address in this component. Unlocking financing for farmers, so credit worthiness. One of the important things that would be required here is even kind of showing what is the what are the credit scores for the different beneficiaries, and there are tools now to do that, so that you can kind of come up with a de-risking mechanism for these populations. And then how do we integrate policy, food system resilience within policies, national and also regional? Again, there's an allocation there to do that. And the final component here talks about availing some contingents, a kind of emergency fund in the event that a shock happens, and the government can be able to respond adequately to that. There are a few select examples there that I will not go into, and so let me just give some concluding remarks here, is that one, in order to kind of build food system resilience, we need to have an accurate understanding of the potential risks faced by different actors, and also a good understanding of, or begin to think about how we can build the skills, the approaches, and the institutions that will assist in withstanding those shocks, but more importantly also maintain the important functions that the different actors within the system plays. We need to focus on building systems that are adaptable, that are robust, but also that are sustainable. And these are systems that are capable of bouncing back from disruptions, while continuing to provide affordable, nutritious, and safe food for all. Ladies and gentlemen, we can no longer assume that pandemics, food price shocks, increases in fertilizer and fuel prices, drought and floods will not happen, and that they will not affect communities. I don't think that's an assumption we want to make. So that's, we want to think about how we will be prepared to deal with those. And my last point here is that actors are facing or are experiencing multiple shocks, right? There's conflict, there's climate, there's, pests and diseases, and there might not be kind of this one solution that speaks to all these shocks, even though the shocks might reinforce each other. And so, again, this is kind of a calling for us to start thinking about how bundled socio-technical but also financial innovations can contribute towards enhancing resilience within food systems. Let me pause here in the interest of time, and I think there's an opportunity to take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. Actually, you've taken exactly 16 minutes. That was an excellent job done under the circumstances. So I believe we have a few minutes. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. If you could please come this way to these comfy chairs. And also, ladies and gentlemen, because I know most of you are thinking about the posh crop that Mwai was talking about, having a sip of your coffee or your tea that's outside. We'll try and keep this very precise. I know he will be around to be able to take further questions. To help us plan, could we just see by a quick show of hands those who might have questions so that we can get a gauge of how many questions we'll need to take? Just by a quick show of hands if you have a question. One there. Do I see another one thereabouts? 2, 3, and maybe we need one from that end. Unless perhaps he was so clear standing next to you that everything went in. We have one more there. So we have 4 questions, ladies and gentlemen. I think we'll start ladies first. So you can pose your question, keep it short, and then we'll maybe we take all of them, and then we queue them, and then he can respond to them. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Kelvin, for that clear presentation. Mine is not directly on what you presented, but I wanted your thoughts about measurement of resilience. Maybe you know, there are many of the approaches we know measure the capacity, resilience capacity index, and, you know, farmers' capacity. But there's a growing ideas that are coming up that may be showing how farmers are actually becoming resilient, and may be more also very useful, or increasingly very useful. For example, if a farmer is able to prevent, because of maybe adaptation or technologies or innovations that they take up, they are able to prevent a fall in productivity the way that would have occurred had they not taken up the measures that they've taken up, or a fall in income that's so drastic, or they're able to bounce back, showing that clearly, as opposed to, you know, just talking about capacities, which don't really address the resilience measurement itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Just to remind everyone, could you just state your name, please, and the organization before we go to the gentleman?
Mercy Kamau from Tegemeo Institute.
Thank you very much. Then we go to the gentleman over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick from Calro, TM from Calro. And thank you, Smith, for the very nice presentations. I don't know whether it's a question or just an attitude. I listened to this presentation and it really picks a lot of things. May not be these issues of food systems and resilience. I know we've been in it for a while, more than 10 years ago. And sometimes I keep asking myself, maybe the subject, there's a missing link, because it seems the scholars understands what it entails to have the food systems, issues of resilience. And I know the people from the policy, the people from the ministry, we can inventorize the number of projects supported by donors, supported even under the ministry, on issues of food systems and resilience. And then, here we are, 70% of our populations are food insecure. I'm sure we are part of the statistics. Then I ask myself, is there hope, given these kinds of findings? And I listen to the farmers and listen to the stories of the farmers, and still even ask myself, and maybe I think we need to find the root cause. Scholars understand the issues. The farmers, they have a challenge. And I think, if I'm not wrong, possibly we need some policy interventions and some issues of socioeconomics, so that we understand why we have several projects dealing with food systems, resilience, adaptation. But what is the uptake of that resilience? Is it a story to tell? I wish there would be a person, a farmer selected from the grassroots to tell us what it entails, because science and reality is different. And that's why this guy is saying, I look at the case study from coffee, and I say it needs courage to walk the talk. We can mention as many stories here, but it needs such young men, now you're not young, to take the talk and to tell the story and to demystify the narrative of agriculture. I think that is where we are, and we must say the truth, my brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. I think you're getting the vibe from Y right next to you there. I will see how Kelvin answers. Those are questions somewhere here, I believe. Please introduce yourself, then pose your question.
My name is Henry Mololo from the National Drought Management Authority. Kevin, I got two for you. One is, I know now we are at food systems, and we seem to have moved really fast from value chain development business call to action, markets for the poor. What has been the problem with those? Because we seem to move too fast without interrogating what we want to fix. That's number one. Then secondly, I want your insight. If I'm able to cope on 1 meal per day because of whatever circumstances I'm in, am I resilient?
Heavy questions coming from NDMA. I think there was one more question somewhere here, and then, yeah, there's a gentleman over there, and then we'll have Kevin try and address those before he forgets the first one.
No, thanks, Kevin. Pasol Maranya from Summit. Kevin, I just had to give you a hard time here, but I will build on the previous questioner's question. So when you talk about food systems, it's an acknowledgement of complexity. But for you to move things on the ground, as he has just said, complexity won't help you. You must bite what you can chew. So it's okay to look at the system, but how do you create something tractable and doable? Otherwise, those of us in this room enjoy talking about all these complex things. Somebody else has to disentangle it, and we need to be part of that disentanglement. Could you comment, Kevin? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Well, very heavy questions. Kelvin, let me suggest that you do have many, many brains in the audience here, so you can also distribute the load when the time comes. So go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Chair, for one of the actually great minds is Dr. himself, so if I'm stuck, I can ask for his opinion as well. But anyway, I think let me come back to your question, Dr. Mercy. I think measurement is an important, unless we can be able to measure what we are talking about here, it's also even difficult to track how much progress we are making. It's difficult even to identify what are the areas that we need to intervene. The way I look at it is that there are several indices, as you mentioned, that have been proposed. One of the things you've talked about is, for example, looking at whatever farmers are implementing, does that address, for example, downside risk? I mean, there are different ways to look at this, right? You need kind of a reference point. You need to see the extent to which whatever has been implemented, or the extent to which food systems are kind of performing against this benchmark. But there are many indicators that can kind of go into. I took the example of the capacities, but that in no way kind of implies that we cannot look at the outcomes that you mentioned, because when you start to think about income and the ability that was stable in the presence of a shock, that's an outcome. But of course, there's something that was implemented, hopefully, right, to make that stability happen. So I think what I was trying to say here is to kind of separate between what the outcomes are of the food system and the other components of the food system that kind of need to be in place for the food system to deliver the outcome. For me, I don't think there's a one way of looking at resilience measurement. I was in one meeting where someone said, let's maybe not talk about resilience measurement, let's talk about resilience estimation. I don't know what the difference is here. But I think there are many ways we can look at this. From where I sit, if we carefully think about it, it goes back again to the capacities. For example, the practices you're mentioning, would most likely fit within agency, right? Do farmers have those capacities to mitigate or to deal with the stresses and the shocks, right? And then you can see the impact of that on the outcomes in the system. I think also what we don't want to lose sight of is the fact that there are many players within that system, beyond just farmers as well. But I think it's an empirical question, the measurement aspect. Food system resilience, inventories, I think that was more of a comment. It would be it goes back again to the extent to which we can measure progress so that we can say, hey, this is where we are, we've been implementing these projects. We have rigorous ways of telling whether whatever we've been doing actually contributes in a meaningful way to certain outcomes. It's possible that in some cases, that evidence does not exist, so we get doing stuff, but maybe it's not very well documented. But I think it's also a good point for us to reflect and say, as you said, what is not going right. I think the opportunity, the framework that I present here gives us an opportunity to assess within that system what seems to be working fine, where do we kind of see gaps, and what then could be done to address those specific gaps. So you don't need to necessarily speak to all the capacities that I mentioned. It really depends, where the gap is, but that might require a careful assessment of the systems. Now, the advantages that you mentioned, there's already, efforts ongoing that present an opportunity for us to start moving towards that evidence generation. What has been problem with value chains and I don't think there has been a problem. To me, I think is an increasing recognition that we perhaps need to move beyond those. It's not saying that yesterday, a large chunk of the day we spent talking about value chains, and we saw the importance that value chains play. So I don't think by any means this means that we should move away from value chains, but I think it just recognizes kind of the complexities that exist, the interactions, that happen in that system, and that extend beyond just the value chains to bring in, different environments, etc. So, but I would, in fact, one of the things, I think the things you talk about I would think that they are part of that system already, including markets. Yeah, the 1 meal question is, look, there are many proxies we use, right, to tell whether in the presence of a shock, a household was able to cope with the shock or not, right, or to adapt. And so again, for me, it goes back to, most of what you're asking kind of speaks to the agency. And as I said, it's difficult to imagine a system that is resilient without thinking about the agency capacity. But most of us are mostly thinking about the farmers and what they can do, or the households, or what they can do to become more resilient. It might be a component, right, an ingredient of a slice of a bigger piece, but it's not, I wouldn't think it's the only thing that would define resilience. And we have to recognize data limitations and how much it would take, for example, for us to be able to, even analyze all the four capacities. Complexities, Dr. I think, yeah, I tried to make it simpler, and I hoped that you would see that it looks less complex than what you've seen elsewhere. But for me, I think it's important to recognize the complexity, but also to start to think about where would be the entry point for us to begin intervening to have meaningful impact. And again, for me, the framework kind of paints that picture, because when you start to look at the different dimensions within these complex systems, the different capacities, you probably begin to identify where to start. Because you also don't want to start from where we probably don't have a gap. But I think the different capacities, and there can be different indicators within a capacity, but that can be a way of beginning to identify carefully entry points for intervention and maybe breaking down the complexity. But that's a difficult one, and Chair had said that others can weigh in, so maybe it's an opportunity to hear from others as well.
Thank you very much, Shikuku. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would propose we give him a round of applause first, please. So, unfortunately, we need to wrap this up because we are behind schedule, but he will be around, so you'll be able to engage him. And I hope there's a way in which further questions can be channeled to the presenter for further action. He's had to handle all the questions by himself. We have, I think, 3 missing seats here of people who would otherwise have assisted. He's done an excellent job, I think. I want to wrap this up by just asking maybe 2 rhetorical questions to the audience based on what he said, so that we can take this with us as we proceed to perhaps to our break eminently. One is, why is there such a lack of commensurate change based on the level of investment in all these resilience activities we've had? I remember working with NDMA when there were arid lands, when it was only 2 districts, I think Turkana, way back in the early 1980s, and we are still doing the same things after so many years. The question is why, and it goes to the question that Patrick asked there. What's the missing link? So that's something for us to think about. This level of investment, this level of change, why? And then the other question that came from our friend here, from the Senate, the doc, maybe we need to ask ourselves, are we just theorists? Are we so much into the theory that we just enjoy crafting papers and one theory after the other and coming up with one buzzword after another one and looking for the funding and moving on? And that's basically why we are here. That's a rhetorical question that you need to ask yourself. What change have we made and what can we do? Why are we here? Thank you very much. I'll hand it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and the Speaker. I know those are very, very serious issues, especially when it comes to the measurements and so on. I know in academic circles, there have been a lot of issues in terms of the measurement. What goes into measuring resilience? When is one resilient? Those are issues that I think we can hardly be able to do justice in a session like this one. But there are issues that we need to recognize that as we move ahead, especially the whole issue about, that continuum between, fragile states and development. So when do you move from emergency status to starting development? Those are very, very thin lines, and I think those are things that we have to take into account as we proceed. So for now, let's proceed with the next session. I would request the chair for this session, Dr. Minale Kasi from ECPE, to take the floor so that he can introduce his speakers. And as we have said, please let's try and be a little bit brief. I know these things are very interesting, but we need to be brief somehow so that we can stay within the time limits that we have. So let me invite the chair of this session as he takes us through and introduces his speakers as we proceed. Yeah, so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Probably can we stand up and then a bit stretch and then we start afresh for this exciting session. Great. Yeah, stretch. Can bend down. Good. Thank you so much. Yes, I think we are behind the schedule almost by 1 hour. So we will see how we can make up the time that we lost. So we are moving. This session is an exciting session. It's gonna deals on the nutrition and the environment ecosystem. I think also on policy. The session formatted in 2 ways. We're gonna have 3 distinguished talks from 3 distinguished speakers, and then following the talks, we're gonna have panel discussions, which are gonna enrich the talks that are gonna be given by the 3 distinguished speakers. So at the end, we'll have a brief Q&A sessions. The first speaker, I think, is Lilian Kirimi from Tegemeo Institute. She will walk us through on the assessment of the policy enabling environment for large-scale food fortification in Kenya. And then following Lilian, we have My Wish from Michigan State University. She will speak on the influence of home and away from home food environment on diets in urban and then pre-urban Kenya. And then after my wish, we have David Matter, again from Michigan State University. He will speak on the cost of nutrition diet in Kenya. So I think without further ado, I would like to call upon Lillian to give her talk. Thank you so much. So Lillian, 15 minutes, possible less.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Anthony is eating into my time. Can I have a presentation? So we try and go fast to see whether we can save some time. So the presentation I'm making, doing that on behalf of my colleagues from Michigan State University and Tegemeo. Okay, I even forgot to say the title. Assessment of the Policy Enabling Environment for Large-Scale Food Fortification in Kenya. And large-scale food fortification, which I'll be referring to as LSSF as we go on, the programs aim to address micronutrient deficiencies by improving the nutrition status of foods that are widely and frequently consumed in a population. And WHO defines food fortification as a process of deliberately increasing the content of one or more micronutrients in a food or a condiment in order to improve the nutrition quality of the food supply, provide a public health benefit with minimal risk to health. And the food vehicles that are used, those foods that are widely and frequently consumed in most of the programs include wheat and maize flours, salt, sugar, rice, as well as edible oils and fats. And the micronutrients that are often added include vitamins, folic acid, iodine, iron, and zinc. For Kenya, for those who are not aware, we have a mandatory fortification for salt since 1978. And since 2012, we have that for maize and wheat flours and vegetable oils and fats. Let me see from the Kenyans, how many of us know the mark of food fortification? Just a show of hand. Who knows how that mark looks like? How many? When you buy your flour, do you know what to look for you to know whether it is fortified or not? How many? Put up your hand if you do. Wow. In this area, there are only 2 people. I can see 2 hands there. That's not good at all, but let's go on. So the success of large-scale food fortification programs depends on the prevailing policy environment, but little is known about what makes a policy environment supportive to LSSF. There is growing literature that we have scanned that shows there are many frameworks that people are trying to use to evaluate LSSF programs, but to our knowledge, we've not seen a study that has explicitly defined those policy elements and gone ahead to assess the adequacy of those elements that matter when we think about a supportive policy environment. So to address this gap, we went ahead to develop a framework that can help define as well as assess the policy enabling environment for LSSF. So that was one of our objectives. And then to validate the framework and demonstrate how it can be operationalized, we applied it to the Kenyan situation. So I'm going to do 2 things in this presentation, show you what that framework looks like, and show you the results we got after applying it to the Kenyan case. when we started looking at the policy frameworks, we started with this view, understanding that the policy enabling environment for LSSF should be that whole policy landscape that influences and enables or hinders fortification activities. The activities that go into fortifications are many, but that environment we are talking about should be able to influence, enable, hinder, and then we'll see where the bottlenecks, what can be improved, and so forth. But our thinking was informed by a variety of frameworks, some of which many of you here are familiar with, including the policy cycle, that's very common, the kaleidoscope model of policy change that shows the drivers of policy change in general. I'm sure a number of us have interacted with that. But we're hoping that the framework that we come out with from studying all these frameworks will help us answer the two questions. First, what makes a policy environment supportive to LSSF? And two, it can help us answer what is working well and where are improvements needed to ensure successful and sustainable programs. So after scanning all what we scanned, this is the, do you have a pointer? So this is the framework we came up with. For those of you who have seen the kaleidoscope model, you can see we borrowed a little bit in terms of presenting this, but it has also quite a bit from the policy cycle, borrowed from there. But this framework has three dimensions, main dimensions: the policy agenda setting, policy implementation, as well as policy monitoring and evaluation. So this, we thought that if you take a framework that addresses these three main domains, together with the elements under each domain, then we'll be able to use this framework to assess if the policy environment is supportive for LSSF or not. So the three dimensions, each one of them has two elements. It could have more, but what we chose are two elements. And overall, the framework has 18 indicators. So the elements and these indicators, we captured the details on those from existing documentation. We did interviews, key informant interviews. We also had a survey to capture stakeholder perceptions. So if I just mention one of the domains, we don't have time to look at all of them, but like the policy agenda setting domain has two elements: policy prioritization and policy formulation. For prioritization, we are looking at how do we bring the issue of LSSF on the table for discussion. And two of the indicators we looked at are major events, for example, global food summits. When people discuss those, when industry players listen to those, does that help bring the issue on the table? Second is the presence of powerful advocates. If you have powerful advocates for LSSF in Kenya, does that help bring the issue to the front? Does it help to, that we can be able to prioritize this as an issue that's not only requiring attention by the Ministry of Health, for example, but becomes a policy issue where other stakeholders can be brought on board, and especially in the area of the formulation. So I'm not going to discuss everything in detail, but this is the framework we came up with. I have said it has 18 indicators, and we went ahead to use this to assess the policy environment for Kenya. But before I go to that, I just want to mention that to we needed to calculate the score based on this framework. And for each of the indicators, 18 indicators, we had a form, we used a 4-point Likert scale to determine what respondents would say regarding the descriptions for each of these indicators. For example, I've said one of the indicators here is the presence of powerful advocates. So the description we gave for this is that there are powerful advocates for LSSF in Kenya. And we expected the respondents to say whether they completely agree and score a 1, or rather disagree and score it as a 1, or completely agree and score that indicator at level 4. So we did that for all the 18 indicators, and having done that, then we summed the scores, and then which would give us a minimum of 18 if you scored 1 for each of the 18 indicators, and a maximum of 72. And then we used the scores to come up with thresholds that will help us to determine whether the environment is favorable or not, and to what extent. So for this case, we looked at a score of less than 36 to indicate that the environment is marginally favorable for LSSF activities. If it is between 36 and 54, we say that is moderately favorable, and beyond 54 or greater than 54, then we would say that the environment is highly favorable. So looking at the Kenyan case, let's focus on the indicators. I said we had 18 indicators, and we, as I have explained, we gave descriptions, and we had respondents give us the assessment. And as you can see, the first domain we scored the highest score for. You know, the domains, whether they were major events that brought LSSF on board or brought it to our attention, the presence of powerful advocates, and so on. And as you see, for the second domain, we begin to see a little less or lower scores, especially in the area of coordination, the capacities of the industries and regulatory agencies. And then we score even worse when it comes to policy monitoring and evaluation. And it's not a surprise that we only have like 4 people in this room who know about the logo for fortification. So consumer education and awareness is very low. But we also have a problem with the data that would need to assess the environment. So the total score for what we did here was 49, which indicates that the environment, policy environment for large-scale food fortification in Kenya is moderately favorable. And we got to this score after we did a validation workshop, brought experts in. Actually, I think we were even in this room. And we had quite a good agreement with the stakeholders. The framework resonates with the stakeholders, and even where we had agreement on the scores, even where those scores were very low. I think we adjusted two of the scores during the validation. So we are happy with the framework itself and what we are able to get out of it when we applied it to the Kenyan case. Now, what do we learn about policy environment for large-scale food fortification using this framework and the scores that I have shown you? One is that Kenya has achieved the greatest success within the domain of policy agenda setting, but we have also now got realized moderate success in policy implementation and a weaker record when it comes to policy monitoring and evaluation. But the positive trajectory for many of the indicators point to a promising future for Kenya's large-scale food fortification program. But we also see the assessment has helped us to see areas where we can improve regarding this LSSF program. So need to focus on financial sustainability of the program. Maybe that did not come out clearly, but when you look at the area of capacities, we see we have we are scoring poorly in terms of capacities, and some of that capacity is actually financial capacity, where Kenya really relies a lot on donor support for the program, and also relies on institutions like DAY Nutrition International to train even the people that need to be involved in various activities, including monitoring and assessments. So those are the areas we need to focus on: financial sustainability, processes for surveillance and enforcement, the data landscape, consumer education and awareness, and capacities. And I want to mention one, that there is need to support fortification among medium and small scale millers, particularly for maize, because we know quite a big community or population relies on the maize meal from portion mills. And that is not mandated, it's not under the mandate for fortification. So we need to think about how to bring those on board, provide the right capacity in terms of training, quality assurance, equipment, to ensure that even these populations that are relying on that, including some schools, to ensure that that population gets fortified flours. So we think the assessment method or the framework is ready to be applied in other settings. And over time, the framework is simple, is comprehensive, straightforward to apply, and can be adjusted to fit in different country settings, either to evaluate an entire program or sub-programs, or even a specific food vehicle. Like if you'd want to do that for maize flour or oils, I think it would still be applicable. And we are happy that the framework can be used to track progress. Like for Kenya, if we wanted to see what happens 5 years down the line, we can redo this to track progress in the domains or even elements or even specific indicators. And we will be happy if this framework is applied more widely, because that will help our understanding of the policy enabling framework for LSSF, not only here but in other places. Thank you, Chair. Thank you
so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Audience, keep your questions. I'm sure there will be many questions. It's great to know there is a favorable policy environment for fortification, but probably we can also ask questions. What local solutions do we have in addition to fortification could be, I think, one question maybe we can entertain. Let me call upon now my wish from Michigan State University to deliver.
Thank you very much. So the presentation I'm going to give is about the influence of the food environments that we are exposed to each day, either at home or at work or away from home, on our diet quality. And specifically we're focusing on urban and peri-urban areas with two of the large cities in Kenya, Kisumu and Nairobi. This is truly a teamwork with colleagues from Tegemeo Institute and other local partners in the region, and also colleagues from Michigan State University, including some graduate students. So just want to team effort. So the impetus for this study comes from the well-known phenomena of food system transformation. We already heard about that from Calvin this morning. But what motivates our work is that this food system transformation is significantly shifting dietary patterns, both in rural and urban areas. And there are several drivers of this transformation, which includes urbanization, changing food cultures, rising incomes, and the growing concerns for health and environment. These changes are presenting complex nutritional challenges. One such challenge is the paradox of dual burden of malnutrition, where the diet-related non-communicable diseases, I'll call them NCDs for short, are coexisting alongside undernutrition. And there are also persistence of hidden hunger or micronutrient deficiencies, which adds to this third societal burden of malnutrition. In recent years, undernutrition has been declining, thankfully, but still remains alarmingly high, as shown in this table, which is specific for Kenya. At the population level, according to this 2022 statistics, about 27% of Kenyan population was undernourished, but almost 32% of the population was considered overweight or obese, which is associated with higher risk of NCDs. With malnutrition, undernutrition, and overnutrition all coexisting simultaneously, the nature of the problem is changing, which means strategies to fight malnutrition have to be adjusted also. And this intricate interplay of the growing importance of understanding and addressing the evolving dietary landscape sort of provides this motivation for the study I'm presenting. So basically we have two research questions that we are interested in this. One is, what are the food choices of consumers and how it is impacting their diet quality? And second, what is the role of the food environment in influencing their food choices? My presentation, I'm going to highlight in three parts the key findings. One is focused on the consumer diets, the second on food environments, and then third on the influence or relationship between the two. I'll try to be brief and perhaps maybe skip some of the slides just to keep us on time. In terms of data, to address our first question, we did household surveys using multi-stage stratified sampling method, basically to make our sample representative of these two cities, urban and peri-urban areas. The survey was conducted in 2022, and our sample consists of about 1,500 households. There are several novel features we introduced in this study. For example, we interviewed or we collected the food consumption data at the individual level rather not at the household level, and we interviewed multiple individuals, adult individuals within the household to get a little bit of the intra-household variations in food consumption. And another novelty was we systematically captured both meals and snacks that are consumed both in the home and outside home. So this is one of our result slides which shows the calories consumed at home and away from home, and whether it is in the form of a meal or a snack. And I know it's a very complex, or it has a lot of colors and bars, but I just want to draw attention to a few key points here. One is that on average about 22% of calories come from out-of-home food economy, which is basically those darker shades, portions of the bar on the right-hand side. And we also see differences by some group characteristics, which are, we have by gender, by poverty class, their commuting status, and then the four regions, urban, peri-urban, Kisumu, and urban, and Nairobi. We see less poor consume more calories from out-of-home food economy than more poor people. These are not very surprising results, but we also see that people who commute get more calories away from home compared to those that do not. Then what we have used for our measure of diet quality is what we call, in the literature, it's called Global Diet Quality Score, in short GDQS. And this accounts, this particular measure accounts for both nutrient adequacy and dietary risk associated with NCTs. And this GDQS is constructed by assigning points to the grams of food you consume each day. These food categories are about 25 different categories. And some of them are considered in healthy food groups, and you get more points for consuming those foods. Some foods are in the unhealthy food category, and you get more points for consuming less of those foods. And then some foods are sort of unhealthy in excess, which means that you get more points for up to certain threshold, but then your points go down if you consume more than some threshold. So in terms of the grams of food that's consumed each day, again, it's a lot of things on the slide, but I just want to bring 4 key points here, which is that the highest consumption is seen in the category of refined grains and baked goods, which falls under the unhealthy food category down there in the red arrow here. And then in the healthy food category, which is the top part, we see whole grain foods. And then in the middle, the blue one is the dairy, the milk consumption. So these are sort of 3 of the top food consumed in Kenyan diets. We also see some unhealthy categories of deep fried food and sugar sweets. And also in terms of some positives, we see dark green leafy vegetables are very prominent, and they are in the healthy food category. But some of the orange flesh fruits and vegetables are consumed less. I think the key point here I want to emphasize is that on average, about 11% of our sample individuals were considered to be under high risk of NCTs. 82%, which is sort of the biggest middle bar you see here, are considered at the moderate risk, and about the lowest level, 7 to 8%, are at the low risk. But we do see some variations among our characteristics of people, like people who are not more poor, which means are better off, and those who do not commute are relatively more in the high risk categories than their counterparts. There is also regional variation, with relatively more people in urban areas at high risk compared to the peri-urban areas. Here the main point I want to show is the diet quality by age group, and there is a positive relationship between age and diet quality, with younger people eating less healthy food and avoiding less unhealthy food. So in terms of the main takeaways from our diet quality data, we see limited dietary diversity. We also see considerable consumption of refined grains and baked goods, purchased deep fried foods and sweets. And among the sweet items, a lot of this mostly comes from sweet tea, which is a big part of the Kenyan diet. And other key takeaways are that, the out-of-home food economy, significant part of urban diets, about 22% of daily calories come from that. And then this reliance on external food sources raises concerns about diet-related NCTs, with 11% of adults at high risk, 82% at moderate risk. There is also a strong link between age and diet quality, with dietary habits generally improving as people age. But recognizing these trends is key to developing effective dietary interventions. Moving to the food environments, basically we collected our data by defining 0.4 kilometer around the radius of the neighborhoods where people were sampled from. And we did a census of all the food outlets in that radius, and then from a subsample we did detailed survey of the shelf space of different types of foods. In the census we basically check marked the type of food they were selling in each outlet according to our 25 food categories of the GDQS. In terms of results, this graph shows the shelf space that is devoted to different types of foods categorized under healthy food, unhealthy, and unhealthy in excess. The darkest bar here, shaded green, is the healthy food. The light middle one is the unhealthy, and then the small, another dark shade is the unhealthy in excess. So the main result here is that there is significantly more shelf space devoted to unhealthy foods in the environments than the healthy foods across all types of food environments, poor, non-poor, urban, and peri-urban. And in absolute terms, the shelf space, the total shelf space for both healthy and unhealthy food is highest in Nairobi urban, which is not surprising because the density of population is highest here. I think I'll just skip this figure where I basically wanted to show one point here, which is that the shelf space as a percentage, shelf space devoted to unhealthy food as a percentage, you see relatively more in areas or among populations where there is high probability of poverty. In terms of food prices exposed that is exposed in this food environments by categorized by healthy and unhealthy food, the main point here is that on a per gram basis, the price of healthy food is more expensive, or it's more than the price per unit of unhealthy food. And so main takeaways from our work on food environment is that I just wanted to highlight two things, that we see both variability across the geographic spaces of our 4 regions, but we also see some commonalities. In terms of variability, the quantity, shelf space, and the prices of healthy versus unhealthy food, we saw some variation. In terms of commonalities, across all types of food environments, we see more shelf space devoted to unhealthy foods than healthy foods. There is more diversity of healthy and then unhealthy foods. It mostly because there are more categories of healthy foods in our GDQS measure. And there is also, the healthy foods are more expensive on a per gram basis than unhealthy food. Moving to this last part of now, what's the relationship between food environment and its impact on diet quality? We did some regression analysis to answer these basic 3 questions. What is the quality of the food environment? Whether, does the quality of food environment explain diet quality? Do other factors mediate the relationship between food environment and diet quality? And does the quality of food environment to which a person is exposed each day explain the day-to-day variation? I'm not going to go in the results, but then the key takeaways of our analysis are basically highlighted here. We find significant relationship between home food environment quality and diet quality. And in terms of other factors that mediate the relationship between home food environment and diet quality, we find gender is one of those important factors. We also find that the quality of the food environment to which a person is exposed each day, depending on where they spend most of their time, also explains the day-to-day variation in their day-level diet quality. So this is my final set of slides on implications. So what are the implications of these findings? Our study highlights the need for policies to improve food environments, especially in economically challenged areas. The key actions include increasing healthy food options, reducing unhealthy ones, and integrating these changes into urban planning for better access and affordability. Additional policies should ensure that healthy food is available both at home and along commuting routes and at destinations, major workplace areas, and that we need to make sure that the nutritious food is accessed and available in all geographies where people spend most of their times, either at home, work, or at school. Just wanted to acknowledge that funding for this study came from USAID, USAID and USDA Sarakia project, but also from the PRCI Innovation Lab that's funded by the USAID in Washington, D.C. And sorry, I had to sort of run through many of my slides and results. I didn't have time to present in detail, but we have a policy brief, and I have included the QR code here. Free to read that policy brief. Asante sana.
Thank you, my wish. Thank you for letting us know what we are consuming, and then the heterogeneity of consumption by age, location, and gender. It's important information to target interventions, and then the drivers of the food that we are consuming. So our last speaker is David Matter. Yes, he's here. So you'll talk on the cost of nutrition diet in Kenya. So you have the presentation.
Good morning. My name is David Mather. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Agricultural, Food, and Resource Economics at Michigan State University, and I'll be presenting key findings and implications from a research paper by myself and my co-author, Dr. Lillian Karimi of Tegemeo Institute, on household dietary patterns and the cost of a healthy diet in Kenya. And support for this research came from U.S. Department of Agriculture and USAID Kenya through the Sarakia project. And the motivation for this study, as you may know, Kenya has made impressive reductions in poverty and malnutrition since especially since 2005. The poverty headcount has been coming down. Stunting for children under 5 has been coming down, yet malnutrition is still somewhat prevalent among children and women of childbearing age. For example, 18% of children 6 to 59 months were moderately or severely stunted in 2022, the DHS. 22% of children of that same age range were anemic, as well as about 17% of children aged 5 to 14 and 21% of women between 15 and 49, and those figures come from the micronutrient survey in 2011. Now, why is this? Nutrition outcomes are influenced by various factors beyond economic ones, but diet quality is a key factor, which is what we're focused on. And we can see poor diet quality among young children and women, also from the DHS in 2022, where only 37% of children aged 6 to 23 months living with their mother had a diet that met the minimum diet diversity score in that year, and that's a proxy for diet quality that's associated with lower rates of stunting. And also only about half of women aged 20 to 49 met the women's minimum diet diversity score, the minimum threshold. And we know that poor diet quality is recognized as a leading cause of non-communicable diseases. And so the research objectives for this paper were, there were 5 of them. One, to estimate the minimum cost of a recommended diet, essentially a balanced diet in Kenya. And we were looking not just at the national level, but by urban and rural, by agri-zones, USAID zone of influence, and this is especially important, as you know, because of in different regions, people can eat somewhat different foods, and prices can vary quite a bit over space. We also estimate the cost of a recommended diet that allows for a bit more flexibility in food choices, called the food preferences chord, which I won't go into as much in the interest of time. And then we investigate, after we estimate those costs, then we investigate the key drivers of the cost of a recommended diet across the 6 food groups of the recommended diet, and then look within them. And fourth, we then assess the affordability of these 2 diets by these spatial domains I mentioned, and by household wealth quintiles. And finally, we analyze household food consumption patterns relative to those prescribed by this recommended balanced diet. And we also look at the role of relative food prices and food group costs in shaping these patterns. And so the method that we use is called the cost of a recommended diet, that was developed fairly recently. And what we do is we estimate the cost of this diet by categorizing food items into 6 food groups that are largely defined by nutritional content. So we have staples that are calorie dense, we have protein foods that are protein dense, and includes meat, fish, legumes, and eggs. Then we have dairy, vegetables, fruits, and oils and nuts. And the method is not that difficult. We find in each given spatial area, we find the 2 lowest cost food items in each food group, or we use 3 for vegetables, mandating that at least one of them is a dark green leafy vegetable. And then we multiply the average cost of those food items by the recommended diet quantity of each food group, such as 435 grams of staples per adult equivalent per day, where adult equivalency is a scale that's based on caloric needs and on sex, and our reference individual is a male aged 18 to 24. And this method produces somewhat more realistic diets than some other cost minimization approaches, and it's simpler computationally, and it helps provide a useful lower bound of the cost of a healthy diet. And then we also use an extension of the chord method, which allows more flexibility for the number of food items in each food group based on what we see in data of local consumption patterns. And so the cost of this diet will be will by definition be more expensive because it's including more food items. So the data we use at the time that we did this study, the most recent data was from the Kenya Integrated Household Budget Survey, KIBS, in 2015-16, which was a nationally representative household survey of nearly 22,000 households. And for our purposes, it's really ideal because it was implemented across 4 consecutive quarters, which helps capture seasonality of food prices and of household consumption. And so the data analysis is based on recall data on household food consumption and expenditure over the past 7 days. And the other main data source is the Kenya Food Composition Tables of 2018, and some information from U.S. Department of Agriculture if we needed some nutrient content. But this provided the nutritional content of 213 food items that are observed in the underlying household level data. And so getting to the results, you'll see, so these are the diet costs of 3 diets. The values here and in this presentation are in Kenyan shillings per adult equivalent, in nominal terms for 2015-16, and coca here, this is the cost, just as we're using this sort of as a reference diet, this is the cost of calorie adequacy. So just the cost of consuming enough calories per day if you're only getting it from the lowest cost common staple food, which in most of these spatial areas is posho maize meal. And so the cost of the recommended diet, you can see here in rural areas is 80 shillings per adult equivalent per day, and it's more expensive, 91 in urban areas. And this is largely due to higher prices in urban areas. And you can see, as we expected, the cost of this food preference cord diet, which allows more flexibility of food items, is more expensive than the cord diet. We also, I won't go into all these numbers, but we also looked at spatial variation in the cost of the recommended diet. So we already looked at rural-urban. We also looked by agrizone, and agrizones are defined by the Kenya's Ag Transformation and Growth Strategy. We also looked in USAID zones of influence, and you can see the lowest cost of the recommended diet is in the Rift Valley and Central Highlands, and then the cost is a little bit higher in western semi-arid uplands, and then highest in the northern central Asals and the coast, as you might expect. And spatial cost differences are largely explained by differences in retail food prices across these zones. And now we look at which food groups are driving the cost of this balanced recommended diet. And as you can see here, so here we have the balanced recommended diet based on just 2 food items in each food group, and then this is a more flexible diet, so it's more expensive. But you can see that the most expensive food groups are first protein food, and then dairy and vegetables and staples. And the difference in the cost of the recommended diet and the more flexible diet, as you can see, is that the protein food cost is quite a bit higher when, for example, in the cord, the lowest cost foods would typically be legumes, whereas here there would be legumes as well as some meat and fish. Next, we consider the affordability of these recommended diets, and this is defined as having household food expenditure per AE, per adult equivalent, at or above each diet cost. Okay, so in the household data, we also observe each household's total expenditure level and their expenditure on food. So in these first 2 columns, you see the diet cost of each of these diets. This is by rural-urban, and then these are quintiles of total household expenditure per AE, from the lowest to the highest. So it's an indicator of wealth. The median food expenditure per AE, this is shown to give you a sense of the median household purchasing power in each of these groups. So then the results that we see are, and then these columns show the percentage of the population that are in a household that has daily food expenditure per AE that's below each diet cost, meaning the percentage of households that cannot afford the recommended diet. So first you can see that with this just basic calorie adequacy diet that's just based on posho maize meal in most locations, 9% of rural households did not spend enough or did not consume enough to meet that diet, 3% in urban areas. And then we see in rural areas, 55% of the population could not afford the recommended diet, and 35% in urban areas. And then note, when we look here by quintiles of total household expenditure, you can see that those in the lowest, the poorest 20% of the population, only 3% of them can afford this recommended diet. And then the second from the bottom, 57% cannot afford the diet. When we get up to the fourth quintile, you can see that 81% of these households can afford this balanced diet, and almost all of those in the top quintile can afford the recommended balanced diet, which we'll keep in mind for a slide that's coming. So then, in this table, we're looking at the population of households. Now we're comparing the actual food consumption of households with the recommended, with a balanced diet. Okay, and so in this section, we're looking at the share of the population at the national level, and then by these wealth quintiles from lowest to highest. And this is the share of households that consumed at least one serving of any of these food groups, of each of these food groups in the last 7 days. And then this section shows the percentage of households that consumed the recommended diet number of servings. And so we can see that that for staples, as you might expect, all households in rural urban Kenya had at least one serving per AE in the last 7 days. That's not a very high threshold. But about half of them lived in households where they consumed the recommended diet quality of staples in the past 7 days, which means that about half of the population is consuming more than the recommended diet quality. And then when we look at protein foods, dairy, vegetables, foods that are more expensive, relatively more expensive, you can see that while 66% of households had at least one serving per AE, actually, sorry, this is per day, of protein, and many of them had at least some of this, each of these food groups. When we look at the recommended number of servings, only 12% of the population are in households that consumed an adequate amounts of protein or protein foods during that week, each day. 27% dairy, very little for vegetables, fruit, oils, and nuts. And then next, we see that there's a strong correlation between household wealth and the share of households that consumed recommended diet qualities. So for example, the population in the top wealth quintile consumes, if you look at protein foods, 13% of them consumed, of those households consumed the recommended diet quantity of protein, compared with only 7% in the lowest quintile. And in some of these other categories, those that are wealthiest consumed, they were 2 to 3 times more likely to have consumed the recommended diet quality. And so in conclusion, some of the conclusions, so half of Kenyan households cannot afford a balanced recommended diet. And why is this? There are 3 main reasons. One is inadequate household income. Number 2 is relatively high prices for protein and micronutrient-dense foods. And in all countries we observe this pattern, but the relative price differences between many of the protein, micronutrient-dense foods and relative to staples in Kenya and East Africa is larger than in higher income countries on average. And why are these food groups, protein and micronutrient-dense foods, so expensive? There's low productivity at farm level, significant yield gaps that we probably won't go into this, as we have other sessions that are looking at productivity, inefficiencies in food marketing, high post-harvest food losses, and especially for perishable foods, local supply chains require adequate storage, especially cold storage, but lack of predictability of policy and enabling environment here has historically reduced investment for the private sector in storage. And so policy implications, in general, for many households in rural areas, raising household incomes and improving the productivity of crop and livestock value chains, these go hand in hand. And Kenya's Ag Sector Transformation Growth Strategy identified 13 crop and livestock value chains with the highest potential for facilitating ag transformation and food security. And so an important thing to note is that different agri-zones have different ecological potential and market access, which means there's a need for each zone and perhaps counties to have specific strategies to address the cost of food. And third, we also have to take into account consumer preferences. So we've seen actually that there's overconsumption of staples and underconsumption of more micronutrient-dense foods is seen even among households that can afford a balanced recommended diet. And so it's a lack of consumer awareness of nutritional information and lack of the understanding of the importance of healthy diets for long-term health and productivity. And some policy implications that I imagine our panelists can speak much more to is would be renewed efforts perhaps by schools, by extension, to promote key messages from Kenya's food-based dietary guidelines that are crafted for specific target audiences and using different means. And with that, with Asante, thank you. So I guess we'll now move to questions and feedback. Oh, it's not there. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. This is an excellent and in-depth analysis that shows consumption pattern and the cost of diet. So your conclusion is alarming. We have a lot of work to do to enhance the availability of balanced diets in terms of production, availability, affordability. So thank you so much. So with this, we'll call upon the three speakers to come to the high table. And then our panelists, I hope they are around, Charles Opio from the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition here in Kenya. Is he around? Or he or she? Okay. So, and then Veronica Kirogo, the Director of Nutrition and Dietetics Service from the Ministry of Health. And then Christine Chek from SIATS, the Agri-Nutrition and Food System. She's Agri-Nutrition and Food System Scientist. So the three speakers, I think you have to be on. But the question will be there and at the end. So. Okay, that's fine. Okay. But where are the three? The two. So I think you can join, that's fine. So, yeah, we were expecting three, but they don't seem to be around, maybe. No, that's fine. The speakers, you can join, and then we can. Oh, you're Veronica? Oh, sorry, God bless you. It's Charles? Charles? Okay, he's not around. Okay, so thank you so much. So what we're gonna do is, I will be gonna be brutal for the sake of time. We're really delayed. So we will reduce the number of questions, of course, and then I will give a max of 2 minutes to answer the questions. After the panelists answer the questions, we'll give maybe a floor, maybe for 1 to 2 questions, the audience to ask a question. So, Veronica, good morning. Yeah. So, well, Veronica, yeah, she's from the Ministry of Health. Well, you have seen the 3 presentations. They try to show us the nutrition, They try to show us the food and nutrition consumptions and the enabling environment here in Kenya. But the Ministry of Agriculture is the primary actor in this country to have a mandate to do research on nutrition and health of a society. So we expect you to give us the bigger picture of, for instance, what is really the current nutrition situations looks like here in Kenya, and what drives this situation here in our country.
Thank you very much. And thank to the presenters because they also alluded to the current nutrition status. And now we are facing what we call triple burden of malnutrition. And here is where we have the coexistence of undernutrition, which is characterized by stunting, wasting, and underweight. Micronutrient deficiencies, or what is commonly known as hidden hunger, and also overnutrition, which is overweight and obesity, which is really a great concern for us, even from health sector, because of the association to the non-communicable diseases, which the two speakers have alluded to. But of concern is that we are not making good progress. When you look at the trends of child undernutrition, which is we use as a proxy to measure the nutrition status of the population, yes, indeed, we did improve significantly the prevalence of stunting for child under 5 years from 26% in 2014 to 18% in 2022, according to the Kenya Demographic and Health Surveys. However, when you look at nutrition status among the adult, particularly the women, when I look around, I can see we are few women in the room. But in terms of overweight and obesity, nearly half of the Kenyan women aged 20 to 49 are either overweight and obese, about 45%. And as they were presenting about the diet, I saw, the consumption of vegetable, affordability of vegetable is really, a very low percentage of less than 10% actually consuming the adequate vegetables and fruits, which actually really agrees with what we had found in our stepwise survey that was carried in 2015, because only 6% of the Kenyans were consuming adequate vegetable and fruit serving as recommended by the World Health Organization. And when you also look at our dietary practices, especially for the young children under 5 years, you find that it's only about 31% of our children are receiving what we call minimum acceptable diet. And this is a diet in terms of meal frequency and diet diversity. So it means 70% of our children 6 to 23 months, which is the complementary feeding period, are not consuming the recommended diet. And then it can explain then why we are having the poor nutrition status among these children. And when you you deep dive into that, why are they not consuming? I think it was alluded. It's the availability, affordability of diet which is diverse, and therefore households are left to give children who are in the complementary feeding period really poor diet. And when you look at then what is the cost of this undernutrition, as a country we are losing close to 7% of our gross domestic product due to child undernutrition. We did conduct a cost of hunger study for Kenya, which was led by the National Treasury in 2019, and we found that based on the 2014 nutrition status for our children under 5, Kenya lost 374 billion shilling. When we communicated with the National Treasury and we were trying to look at the figure, we were actually told that figure, 374 billion, was actually less than the money that was allocated to the 47 counties during that financial year. That's the cost of undernutrition. And you know, when I came here and sat in this room, and I was looking, this is a food system expert, food security expert. And I think we hold the key to resolving the cases of undernutrition in the country by availing food that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality, and which is affordable. And I think, when I looked at the policy implication and what we need to do, I think it's very clear what we need to do from the health system, from the food system, and also from the social protection system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Just a follow-up question. You have alluded, you mentioned several challenges. The presenters also mentioned really several challenges even before this session. Kelvin also has mentioned several challenges, and then the audience also mentioned quite a number of challenges. So what is the current resource mobilization or funding status looks like related to nutrition, to develop and promote nutrition-related innovations, policies, and then to do campaigns related to just advocacy for communication and social mobilization? Just briefly, what is the funding situation looks like here in Kenya?
I pause because, when you look at the funding levels, both, especially from the domestic resources, it's really a great concern. Because as I sit here, we heavily depend on donor funding for nutrition programming. Whether you look at it from the health sector or from the other nutrition-sensitive sector, and it has been a journey of continuous advocacy for increasing the domestic resources, and that is why we conduct, we conducted the cost of hunger study just to show how much as a country we are losing for inaction. And I can say from that study and several other advocacy instruments, we have been able to advocate for increase in budget, not very significant, but from the health sector, we have been able to increase from almost zero per year to about 100 million per year allocation. But looking at what the donors are contributing, we are guided. Our nutrition priorities are guided in a multi-sectoral strategic blueprint we call the Kenya Nutrition Action Plan. We finished the previous one, which came to an end in 2023, and the cost for implementation of that document for the 5 years was about 38 billion, which translates about 7 billion per year, and it's a multi-sectoral, so it prioritizes both interventions from nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive sector. So when you compare now those resourcing from the domestic funding, then it's just a drop in the ocean, meaning that we require a lot of evidence in terms of for us to be able to push for budget increase of budget allocation, because studies have also shown, and we have evidence. We did carry with support from World Bank and UNICEF. We did an investment framework for nutrition in Kenya in 2016, and it was found that for every dollar we invest in nutrition intervention, it yields $22. Really, that's a smart investment. So it means that then we need to continue advocating increasing coverage of our nutrition intervention for us to be able to address the triple burden of malnutrition.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Coming to Christine. Christine is from SIAT. I'm sure I know CIATS and other international research organizations are doing this excellent research on uptake of nutrition-related innovation and the behavior of the society. So really advancing this nutrition agenda, society matters. The behavior of the society, the knowledge of the society, the attitude of society towards a new technology, or maybe to transit from one innovation to the other innovation is very important. There any study probably that CIAT or maybe other institutions that carried out related to consumer acceptance of the blended maize and wheat in Kenya? A consumer acceptance study.
Thank you very much, Menale, for that introduction and the question. So within CIAT, we've done a lot of research looking at the acceptability of different commodities, especially looking at nutritious foods, looking at what we call the healthy and sustainable diets broadly, and also the commodities specifically. They might be the blended fortified wheat flour, maize flour, but also fruits, vegetables. And we've looked at these components to see what are the challenges, what are the issues, what are the acceptabilities, and also what approaches could be used to increase demand for these commodities. So, so what we learn first is that, for instance, issues to do with fortification, and thanks Lillian, she presented a very nice overview of the fortification agenda and the framework. We see fortification comes in a new approach or a different approach that is targeting increasing micronutrients in those certain commodities that are targeted, which is very important because not everybody will be able to afford or to purchase or to access these other nutritious commodities. So they play a role. Fortified commodities play a role. At the same time, not everybody will access those fortified commodities, like Lillian alluded earlier. You go in the rural areas, and the people in the rural areas will produce their maize, they mill, and they consume without necessarily being fortified. On the other side, we look at the nutritious products like the vegetables and fruits, and looking more holistically in terms of not necessarily the ones which have been fortified, but then other commodities which are naturally nutritious. And what's the demand? What are restrictions or issues around the demand of those commodities? So we've learned lessons on both ways. And just to give a summary of what we see from the fortified, people don't have awareness at all, like Lillian mentioned. And she was asking who is aware of the branding or the brand, the mark of fortification. Actually, consumers do not know why even they need to consume those fortified products like the wheat or the maize flour. The knowledge, the awareness is very low, and people will just go to the market or to the shops and they purchase the commodity. I'll buy Elianto because I like Elianto as a brand, but not because Elianto for oil as our oil brand is fortified. I'll buy X wheat flour because I like it, but not because of the constitution of the micronutrients that are in there. So the awareness and the knowledge to the consumer is a big, big challenge. And sometimes you ask, especially when you go to the low-income areas and you're asking the low-income consumers, what are their preferences for these commodities, the fortified and the non-fortified, and they're like, I don't even have enough to eat, so why should I worry about the fortified one or the non-fortified one? I'll get even the unpackaged one and consume it because this is what I can afford, and this is what are available to me within my economic limits. So the issue of affordability comes in strongly, and availability, affordability, accessibility. And you saw also what David was presenting, the socioeconomic status and the income levels, the poverty levels. That has a big influence on what people are demanding and what people are accepting or not accepting in the market. And they'll say, I know I need to eat vegetables, but I don't have the money. I'll go to my maize flour and buy it and eat with whatever I can afford because I don't have the economic capacity to afford those foods that you're telling me to afford. So the big question that then comes back to us again here is how can we, as experts in the room, structure our food system to make sure that this food system is able to provide, is able to provide affordable, nutritious foods or healthy foods, is able to make these foods available to these consumers. Because if we are not able to address the issue of affordability, availability, accessibility, we will not really handle any issues on the side of consumer. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a follow-up question, but for the sake of time, what we're going to do is let's give her just the floor to ask especially the speakers. Then one over there, one there. First here. Where is the mic? Do you have extra mic?
Thank you very much for the speakers. My question, basically, or a comment, goes to either Professor Mawish or Professor David. In your presentations, is there any data that is segregated to find out the issue of school-going children or school feeding programs in terms of the cost of food or environment? Thank you.
Thank you. Very brief question. Thank you so much. Maybe we can give to that and then they can answer.
Thank you very much. My name is Olwuch from FAO, but allow me to ask as a citizen, so I'm not asking as FAO. In all the presentations, we've had the word affordability be mentioned over and over again. And this is to the two ladies who've spoken or anybody else. The issue of kitchen gardens and people being able to produce their own food, I haven't had it been mentioned. So I would like to just know, what is the role of people growing their own food rather than being boxed into this thing that they must buy their food? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe my question to Lilian, or maybe it's all of you. It's good to have fortification, but still we have a challenge for fortification to take it to the community, especially to the remote rural areas. What about the option of cropping patterns? Because we have nutrient-dense crops, especially those pollination-dependent crops. This could be probably taken as a local solution in addition to this fortification, biofortification issues. Because right now we are focusing more on energy and protein production, focusing on maize, but we're giving less attention to other nutrient-dense crops. Thank you.
Hello. So your question, I think my answer is short. Our sample only included adults and their dietary patterns. Just because of our institutional review board guidelines, we couldn't, collect this data for children. So at least in our study, we don't have any information on children's food consumption and especially if there is any school meal that they are being fed. But I don't know if David has any response to that.
Yes, thanks. That's a great question. So the data we were using is household food consumption at the household level, which is great that data exists, but it's limited in that ideally it'd be good to have individual specific food consumption as was collected by the urban peri-urban food survey. So I'm not aware of such data. But yes, it would be great to be able to see, and with feeding, school feeding programs, what's being served, and then what are individual children, what are they eating, would be fantastic to have that kind of data to analyze. But maybe the panelists know some, but I'm not aware of that data. There may be some that's specific to just a few areas, but I'm not aware of it. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just to add to that, I am happy to note the presence of the Executive Director of KIPRA because at a program that the government is implementing, the National Information Platform for Food and Nutrition, they have been, KIPRA has done a lot of analysis, including the cost of school feeding. The website, all those analysis or the studies are available in the website. I think it would be good if you can also see whether, you get what you're looking, you're asking. But also, now that I also have the mic, the MIPIM is a platform that was established so that we have a central repository for information on food and nutrition. And in fact, when David and my wish were presenting, I even just texted the ED to find out whether that, the studies are already part of what we have in the MIPIM. So I think it will be important because, you also had the policy brief. We are in the government, so we need to see what came up in those policy brief for us to be able to see whether it's something that can be adopted by the government as we move forward. So I think I will be happy to engage with you so that we see then how we can utilize the finding of those studies. Thank you.
To comment briefly on the question about the affordability and the role that I would call it broadly urban farming would contribute in making the foods affordable. We've been doing some work actually on urban gardens and what role they can contribute, specifically looking at the vegetables, different types of vegetables, and some legumes. And we are finalizing some analysis in Kisumu. This is specifically in Kisumu, and we targeted some experiments in urban low-income areas in Kisumu. The findings are very good. We are finding that households that have the urban gardens, and of course, it was not just urban gardens. It comes back to what I was mentioning about the food system interventions. You really have to have combination of different interventions. We trained them on the kitchen gardens, or what I would call urban gardens, because some of them, they're not within the kitchen, but they're within the backyard. And we trained them, we had a continued training on nutrition education, telling them what they need to consume, why healthy diets are important for them, what kind of nutrients they need to consume for different groups of household members, and all this information was given to them in a continued, it was almost 1 year, for 1 year. And when we did the analysis, now we are finalizing that analysis, we are already finding that households that had these urban gardens they have increased their consumption of vegetables by 25%. So that already shows something very good. We are still differentiating to see what is the role or the contribution of the kitchen gardens alone, what's the role of the nutrition education alone, what's the role of these combined interventions alone. But I can say that confidently, based on what we are finding, especially from these findings, and also some other work we've done in Ethiopia, similarly, looking at the urban gardens and the trainings and setting up the gardens with them, we see those positive results. So that shows there's a very big role that our urban gardens can contribute towards healthy diets and towards making these foods affordable. And we should definitely get into that space and help the consumers do that. Having said that, people will not be able to produce everything within their backyards. And also there are people who don't have any backyard at all. Maybe it's just few containers to put the vegetables. And the question also is then, how can we make our food system more efficient in terms of even the market linkage? I think it was, I can't remember who made, I think it was Kevin who presented in the morning, and he was saying that the issues of market access, that's a big challenge. If farmers produce their, even beans, it's a nutritious commodity, but they don't have a market. It will just be there and they sell in the neighborhood without any good prices, whereas the urban people don't have any beans to consume. So providing the market linkage is key, and making sure there is those efficiencies within the chain, within the market system, up to the consumer will also help to reduce the cost of these commodities and making them more affordable.
Thank you, Lilian. Just Lilian briefly, then.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The question you posed was about having a more holistic approach beyond food fortification. And I think Christine has mentioned some of the things I wanted to say. The large-scale food fortification programs, I think they are
very specific in meeting a need, the micronutrients deficiency. That's why we're adding vitamins, we're adding zinc, iron, and those kind of things in very specific food vehicles. And not everyone will have access to the fortified foods. Kenyans, what you have here is the logo for fortified foods. So if you haven't been checking, please check when you next go to buy your flour, your oils and fats. Even Blueband has it. So a number of us have access to that fortified food. We don't know perhaps, but not everybody has, because like for the flours, we know we consume a lot from the portion meals. I like the portion meal flour myself, but I know it's not fortified, and many people will be eating that. It's not fortified, so how else can we reach, get the nutrients we need? I think the chair said, yes, we can grow the nutrient-dense crops. So there are issues of what these crops are, the fruits, the vegetables, the legumes, but we have also seen that they are also expensive. One way of going around that, Christine said, is the kitchen gardens. Not everyone has the garden, but we can see how we can be able to bring these foods to the market at lower costs. The other thing is the blending of flours. We've seen some of these are even in our shelves, where maize flour is mixed with sorghum, amaranth, and several other things that will add other nutrients that are not in the maize. So I think we have a few options that can help us get a more an enhanced nutrition in the foods that we either buy from the markets or we produce in our gardens. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This was an exciting session, but time is a constraint. But we can continue even after the discussion after. So thank you, the speakers. Thank you for the panelists for the wonderful discussion and the presentation.
Thank you for that discussion, Chair. Thank you for steering that discussion under very tight timelines. Can we give a hand for the Chair, please? Okay, please, let's take this time to attend to our food security ourselves. We need to go for tea. So we take the next 15 minutes. For 10 would be nice, but not very feasible. But let's take precisely 15 minutes, and then we come back for the next session, so that we can get started. I know the next session will need to move it a little bit faster than this. So please, the tea is served at the corner the other side. So let's take those 15 minutes and then be back here for the next session. Thank you very much. Enjoy your tea.